Okay, so okay,
Why don't you go ahead?
great. Hello, welcome to the online interactive today. My name is Nalini, and I'll be your host. A few words about logistics first. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already done so. Also, do share your email address in case you are not a meetup member, so we can share the presentations with you later. During the call, it is better if everyone is muted. If you have a question, please type in the chat room. We will save all the questions for question and answer session at the end. At that time, one of us will read out the questions. As I indicated earlier, slides will be shared afterwards, so no need to make any notes. Now let me take a few moments to introduce PM World. PM World has been around for 13 years. It is made up of project managers, program managers, project coordinators, and people aspiring to such careers. We have nearly 1,100 members in Meetup, about 450 in Yahoo group and 50 in a newly created LinkedIn group. So at this time, I invite you all to join LinkedIn and Meetup group later when you have some time. In general, we meet once a month face-to-face, generally on first Tuesday, and we strive to do a monthly webinar on most likely second Thursday every month. So please, you're welcome to join all of those. We also provide courses and resources for career development. So tend to be helpful for people and useful, hopefully. So hopefully by the end of this online interactive, we would have gained some knowledge of blockchain and its application in the various industries, developed some understanding of how blockchain project differs from commonly known database projects, and identified required functional background for a typical blockchain project team member. Now let me pass the baton to David, who will introduce the top panelists and moderate the discussion.
Thank you, Nalini. I'm going to change the presentation here. So this is Dave Snyder. I'll be your moderator tonight. My consulting practice is 42 Tech, and I do program management and product management in a number of areas. We're going to go over very quickly the basics of blockchain, and then we have our two panel members, Tim Christensen and Timothy Ruff, who they'll introduce themselves later, and they have their slides. For those of you just learning about blockchain technology, this is just going to be a quick overview. We often talk about it as distributed ledger technology in contrast to a centralized database. The name blockchain comes from blocks of data that are chained together with cryptography, and this makes it almost impossible to make changes once something is recorded in the blockchain, and we'll talk about how that happens. It's the technology that makes Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies work, and it's important to remember that it's not for everything, and we'll be hearing some use cases, but there's some specific conditions that make it important to use blockchain, and we'll talk about that probably a little bit. Blockchain is expected to become pretty common as people become more familiar with it, just the same way that we use the web without understanding how TCP/IP works. It'll be the underlying technology for some of the things that we end up using. The original white paper for blockchain technology was released in 2008. The person who wrote it actually went by a pseudonym, and financial uses were originally the most popular thing, but we're seeing more and more other use cases that we'll be talking about it. Personally, I'm interested in the Internet of Things, the data from all of these devices, especially the provenance of the data and the quality and security for that data, and there's certainly some interesting applications being developed for that. Let's walk through this formal definition from Ethereum, which is one of the types of cryptocurrency. A blockchain is a distributed computing architecture where every node executes and records the same transactions, which are grouped into blocks. Only one block can be added at a time, and every block contains a mathematical proof that verifies that it follows in sequence from the previous block. That's true in Ethereum and Bitcoin, not necessarily in some of the other kinds of blockchains, but generally that's the concept. Or I should say that the proof of the consensus, which is the next thing, that's the part that is not always done the same. The consensus across the whole network is maintained, and individual user interactions with the ledger are secured by strong cryptography. And here, the nodes that maintain and verify the network are incentivized by mathematically enforced economic incentives coded into the protocol. That's certainly a Bitcoin and Ethereum thing. So one of the key concepts that you need to know about is the cryptographic hash function. And if you look at the yellow text in the upper left, if you run that text through the algorithm for hashing, you get a long string of a fixed size of letters and numbers like shown in the red box. If you change that file and run it through that same algorithm, you're going to get a string of the same length but entirely different. In the lower box, you see I've just removed one number from the text. The interesting thing about hash functions are they're so complicated that you can run it forwards and get the hash, but from that long string, you can't really go backwards and get that text file. So this is really good for knowing that you have a good copy of the original text, because if you run the hash function on a perfect copy, you should get the exact same hash. This is used in the chaining of blocks. Once the initial block is set up, called the genesis block, then you have and you embed the hash of the previous block in the next block. And this enables you to have some confidence that nothing has gotten changed, because if you change one of the blocks, then this sequence gets broken. And there's a really good video explaining this on YouTube, and when you get these slides, you can use that link. Now, I like to use a slightly different way of showing a blockchain. You'll often see pictures like those on the left. The one on the right, I think, is a little more true to form, in that you have all these different computers connected together over the internet, and each one has a copy of the database. So just to review, in a blockchain, there's no central authority unless you're running what's called a permissioned or private blockchain, and we'll talk about those later. But because everybody's got a copy of the distributed ledger, everybody has this shared record, the trust comes from knowing that the record is immutable and time-stamped once things are properly recorded. It's especially good in cryptocurrency for preventing this thing called double spending, which is in a financial situation, if you have $1,000 in the bank and you write a check for 500 and another check for 500, and then you'd write a check for 200, you don't want the bank to, or the bank does not want to be paying out on that check for 200. They don't want to double spend your funds. And the way blockchain transactions work is a great way to prevent this double spending. So we've talked about hashes, and we'll talk a little bit about proof of work by miners as one of the ways for making sure that consensus is maintained. Very quickly, I'll talk about how Bitcoin works. You can always go and study this in great depth. But about every 10 minutes, new transactions are broadcast and a new block is created, and then there's a puzzle to be solved. a mathematical puzzle. And it takes a lot of computing power to calculate that. And whoever calculates that first wins a reward of a little bit of Bitcoin. And they circulate their proof, their solution to the puzzle. And if everybody agrees on that, then and only then is that block accepted into the blockchain. And that happens about every 10 minutes, and then the process starts over again. So in a public blockchain, everyone can read and write data to it, and this is the Bitcoin and Ethereum blockchains. You can get the software, anybody who wants to go out and download it, it's available. And the trust comes from the way the transactions are recorded. In a private blockchain, you have someone who is in authority, and financial institutions have especially been looking at this because they want to be able to control who can look at the transactions instead of having them be public. And industry is also looking at private blockchains for automating transactions among Internet of Things devices and so forth. And there's a link here that you'll be able to use to read a little more about that. Here's another comparison of public and private or enterprise blockchains, contrasting that both the who can access it, how they operate, which faster or slower, the kind of security, and so on. One of the things you'll hear about is the concept of smart contracts, and I think Tim Christensen is going to talk a little bit more about this. But for example, you can have a script that automatically executes if certain things are entered in the blockchain. Then if this, then that. For example, proof of delivery and instructions what to do once something's been delivered, like pay the invoice. Maybe even having devices talking to each other at the edge of the network instead of having to go up to the centralized database and have somebody act on something. These things can be automated. So here's some of the blockchain use cases, and I'll talk about these very briefly, and then you'll hear some more from Timothy. The left-hand column has several financial uses. Walmart is experimenting with blockchain technology to help track food in the supply chain from the farm to the store, so that in the event of food contamination, they can very quickly know where a batch came from and track back to the source and isolate all of the affected packages. Another favorite of mine is property records. In some countries, property records can be corrupted by corrupt officials. And if you have something recorded in a blockchain, it's much less susceptible to that. And there are government organizations already experimenting with this, for example, in Estonia. I even heard of a proof of concept project in Cook County, which is where Chicago is located. Supply chains, certainly another popular subject. Authenticating artworks and tracking the origin of diamonds and other assets. So like I say, Tim Christensen is going to take a deeper dive into some of these use cases, and then Timothy Ruff will be talking about his work in using blockchain for tracking identity information. I mentioned earlier I'm interested in the Internet of Things. So right now, Internet of Things ecosystems often depend on a central network with someone in control, but we're now looking at the potential for blockchain to allow these devices to identify and authenticate each other. So that's about what I have. I'm going to share these slides, and there'll be a link to my website where there's some additional resources. And now I'm going to turn it over to, if Timothy's ready to present his slides, and if we can get Timothy's slides running by Timothy, that's great. Otherwise, I'll be able to run them. So Timothy, I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can make you the presenter.
Is that for Timothy Dolera or Tim Christensen?
Tim Christensen, I'm sorry. I'm saying Tim
okay.
and Timothy. And
right. No problem.
So make presenter, and you should have it, Tim Christensen.
Yeah, let me go ahead and grab that. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, you can, and we'll have questions later, but if you do have questions, please start adding them in the chat room, and I think Jackie or someone will be collecting those to talk about it at the end.
And by the way, should I turn my webcam on, or are we just driving with the screen, Dave?
I think screen's just fine. That way the video won't steal any bandwidth or viewing screen.
That's what I was thinking also. Great. Well, thanks again, Dave, for your presentation and for a fantastic job painting, a lot of the colorful history and also just basics and fundamentals of blockchain. I think you did a fantastic job, and that was really well done. So just a quick introduction to myself, Tim Christensen. I am a management consultant and entrepreneur. I started my career originally at Merrill Lynch in the investment banking world on the sell side, institutional sales. Was a registered investment advisor for a couple of years with them, and found that I was really most passionate about the technology in the companies that we were trading, and wanted to move more into the heart of it, and had done a lot of programming as a kid. And so I moved over to Bank of America's investment services group and got my project management and business analysis training there. Left as a senior project manager, and went and did some very large wide area network migrations for some major banks, and later built a specialization in post mergers and acquisitions IT integration. So one company buys another one, or even divests a company, and there are a lot of decisions that have to be made about what IT is going to go forward, and based on those apps, you can develop a roadmap for locations and where data centers need to be, where people are going to be, etc. And so I was originally recruited to HP's team for mergers and acquisitions, divestitures and outsourcing, and managed their largest software company acquisition integration at the time, which was Mercury Interactive for $4.5 billion, and also managed the $1 billion acquisition integration of Bitphone and several others. And so I just mentioned that to say that I've gotten a very close look at global, very complex IT transformations that are end to end, and a lot of that experience has colored my work in developing use cases using the blockchain for companies that we get requests from, companies that we're working with on solutions already, companies that are interested in some of our core products at Data Chain Solutions. So I have a mix of project management, program management, and also entrepreneurial background. I sold my last company in the network security space in 2009 for valuation around $12 million, and have been working in the blockchain space since 2015. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you, and Why don't you head into
Yeah.
slides?
Yeah, absolutely. So as everyone knows, billions, and may have been reading, billions have been invested in blockchain ventures since 2016. Despite some misconceptions that blockchain implementations are years away, CoinDesk was reporting last year in 2016 that we'd see full deployments in financial services, insurance, and healthcare industries next year, this year. And I can tell you from the front lines that that is true. I'm aware of a couple of, one major bank, one community bank at least, that are utilizing blockchain-based real-time payment systems and looking for white label solutions for that. So I already see this quote coming true. 42 of the major global banks have been involved in proof of concepts for over a year now, many of those successful, some not. And over billions of transactions a day are now processed on the main blockchain, blockchain 1.0, the Bitcoin blockchain. As Dave pointed out, there are a number of other both public blockchain solutions such as Ethereum and private chain solutions, many of which are used by financial institutions and others with data privacy and sensitivity issues. So at DataChain, we are, at least with our initial products, focused on real-time payment systems in a mobile app and also a desktop setting. You have you're unbound from traditional business hours for transactions. This integrates well with people's mobile lifestyles today. And one of the keys is reduction in transaction fees and also streamlined processing times from days down to minutes and often in real time, even internationally. Some of those settlement times now for international transfers are over 10 days and over 15% in some cases. So we're focused primarily on three industries: financial services, telecom, travel, and hospitality. We are actually focused right now on a joint venture with a telecom company working on financial payment and remittance solution, a proprietary solution we're developing with them, as well as some new assets and new exchanges, new digital exchanges, I would say, that we're creating with them to trade new types of assets. Mobile minutes is a multi-$100 million market, $100 a year market, and there are other areas that are yet unexplored in the area of new assets, things such as gigabytes, the ability to use other new types of assets. For financial services, I would say that we are seeing some banks, particularly community banks, but also now larger retail banks, global banks, that are looking for white label full solutions for real-time payment systems to augment or replace their DDA solutions. And in travel and hospitality, we're actually working with the European Airport Owners Association on a number of different use cases. Speaking of different use cases, in this next slide, I just wanted to outline a few of the many areas, and David touched a little bit on this. We found we actually had one slide in common that was talking about the various markets. He did a great job there, and I hope I'm providing a few different examples here that you can just kind of see. And coming out of an investment banking background, I've been quite passionate about the possibilities for straight-through processing. We do have some products in development now for that. It's not our focus at this time, but looking out down our roadmap, that is definitely an area of interest. So for me, the financial transactions, and for our company, this is an area of concentration. But others are really looking at public records, and especially around real estate, property title, all sorts of title insurance. The blockchain could offer a very reasonable and economical authentication, validation, and storage service. We have developed use cases, for instance, for physical asset keys in the use case economy, and for instance, rental cars, and looking at the next generation of how OEMs are going to become more involved in that ecosystem and that value chain, taking more ownership of the value chain, and how the blockchain can be used to help users do everything from register for the rental car service to actually generating a code to open the car and start the vehicle. And so constant interaction with the blockchain as a method of authentication is something that we are working with a number of companies on. There are, others who are looking at the intangible asset space and private records, and so happy to discuss any of these topics with others afterwards where there may be interest. This next slide is just sort of more of the same sorts of ideas. I've got more detailed slides following this. I'll just touch on the white space solutions. So, the CEO of SAP famously quoted, and we've got this quoted in several of our decks, as saying that the white space that exists between ERP systems is, about 80% versus the 20% of the ERP solutions that can actually, talk to one another and are easy to get data in and out of. So we're seeking to address this problem with our hosted private chain data as a service and data automation solutions. We've got these listed on our website. We also look at corporate currency solutions. Those are easily created on the blockchain, just as there is Bitcoin. We enable companies to create their own corporate currency. Nike, I believe, has their own Bucks program, for instance. And there's some other interesting use cases that you would run across online if you were to take a look of some of the history behind this. But I think we'll see more and more of this. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of proprietary digital currencies now. I think we're up over 1,000 at least at this point. We are seeing some demand from corporations for this as a loyalty program and employee benefit. We're also talking to some healthcare companies about medical records and just records in general, financial records, health records, how to make records more accessible to people so that people can actually start to have copies of things like their medical records and key financial records, stored in an encrypted and highly secure way that is still easily accessible for them. And I mentioned earlier a bit about the ownership economy and how one example of the usage economy is a use case for automotive that we have been talking to one of the major automotive OEMs about. So I had just explained a bit about the YourBucks corporate currency, how to use blockchain to create these sorts of loyalty incentive programs. And we had also just discussed at a high level how an automotive OEM is looking at vehicle rental use case, but actually looking across the enterprise of one of the major automotive OEMs. We were asked to take a very broad stroke to look at even 5- and 10-year plans, and even go as far as looking at the factory floor to see what a blockchain-centric model of their enterprise could look like. And we were very excited to challenge and develop a model where there would be the capability to issue and track even parts at the individual part level throughout the life of the part. Because of the power of the blockchain, once records are created, they cannot be altered nor destroyed. blockchain is immutable, and so there's no worries about these records. There's advantages around timestamping, around correlation of the data, and around using smart contracts to automate a number of the supply chain scenarios. So this has been a very interesting exercise, and gained a lot of praise for this model. We'll see how much of it gets implemented, but it's very exciting to see what even some of the older corporations of America are looking at and seriously planning for with all of the momentum of the blockchain. So next slide is for records management. We are reimagining records management and looking at, again, private chain solutions to reduce cost, looking at rule-based methods for validating information, utilizing smart contracts where it makes sense, and this is a massive, massive market. I believe that the processing time around paper healthcare claims is on average over 120 days, and it is a multiple $100 billion a year market. So Data Chain Solutions has platforms and products and services for creating the next generation of blockchain-driven solutions. We have developed a solution from the ground up that is a custom blockchain platform, although we are blockchain agnostic. So we're able to utilize an Ethereum blockchain, the original Bitcoin blockchain, and have developed a number of private chain environments, both hosted and completely private, that we utilize for different purposes. So we do have cloud-based delivery. We currently have a mobile app deployed for payments, remittances, and currency exchange in 168 of the world's currencies. I mentioned that we are a blockchain agnostic solution in that way. So we're, again, designed not for one single solution, but as an extensible platform. And what we found is that by developing a user account-based model for tracking, noting, and calculating value, as well as other algorithms, that we actually have created a highly extensible platform that can actually solve a lot of different problems in other industries in a similar fashion and in an easier way. So again, some of our other platform capabilities are data automation and unification. We're accessing and analyzing big data, interface to ERP, banking, and money transfer systems. There are onboard document imaging and tracking capabilities. We are able to serialize parts, have even serialized things like office equipment, lease contracts, document packages, just to give you some idea of the types of things that can be packaged up and tracked via the blockchain from creation all the way to end of life. And then, of course, we are focusing initially, as many companies are, on financial transactions. We are developing custom payment systems. In some cases, we're working with a new thrift in the state of Nevada, for instance, on some custom payment systems. The blockchain is key to distributing, tracking, and reporting asset ownership. And one of the great things about the blockchain, as Dave may have touched on, is that, because of the distributed nature of it, you really have this real-time transparency where all parties to a transaction or all parties to a scenario are going to receive real-time updates at the exact same time. And in some industries, this is quite a breakthrough. We are able to transact in cash through our extended network of payment locations through our partners. I mentioned we're in the process of formalizing our joint venture with a major telecom company this month, and we'll have thousands of payment locations through their network, which is where we can accept cash into the system, and in some cases, although it's not our standard practice, we can remit cash as well, although we tend to do that through Bitcoin ATMs whenever possible. Move on to the next slide, and this is really where I tried to focus a lot of attention and thought on what might be most relevant to the project management audience, aside from hearing a bit about me and our company, DataChain Solutions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about resources. As project and program managers, we're often responsible for the project resources, and in fact, recent statistics about resources would indicate that resources in the development community are in very short supply. I qualified, I'm just meaning that these would be developers who had bona fide experience working on significant blockchain, either public or private chain development projects, 3 to 5 years experience in crypto, and yes, so with those sorts of qualifications. But if one were to exclude governmental institutions and think tanks, that number is actually closer to 3,500. This talent is in very high demand, hard to retain. Qualified developers are frequently offered large cash incentives. I have seen this happen on projects, not within my control, but I have witnessed with a wince and a smile, not the way that I would have done it, and it is not the way that we work at DataChain Solutions, but I know that this is not unheard of, and in fact frequently practiced internationally, where blockchain developers will request or demand payment in advance, sometimes for an entire development project, and I know a lot of developers that are actually getting this. It's also hard to retain them. They're constantly being poached by recruiters, and so I would just provide some cautions around the developer talent. Guard it carefully, treat it well, and certainly do a good job to make sure that the talent is a good fit. There's a lot of rock stars out there within the small community of developers that have significant experience. And so, sort of all the project management issues that come with that type of talent, I would say, is important to keep in mind. I have used and would highly recommend an agile approach. I would go with 2-week sprints. I would monitor the milestones very closely and make sure to document the developer progress towards those milestones, and make sure to get evidence of the milestones. The talent's all over the board. Some of it's a lot younger. So again, just project management fundamentals really pay off big in these projects from my experience. And I've worked with very inexperienced, very experienced, rock star, very humble. I've worked with a number of different types of blockchain developers. So no guarantees what you will get, but best to be ready for all types. if you are managing a public blockchain with a public blockchain exchange, there may be a back end to the exchange that has some processing time delays to it if there's a beta site or a test site. So I would just provide that caution with development of mobile apps. There's always delays with test flight, for instance, as many of you may know from developing mobile apps with iOS, and Android has its own store. And then, of course, if your blockchain project is financial, then your entire product or service will most likely be subject to one of the triad of KYC-related regulations and compliance initiatives and best practices for KYC, Know Your Customer, AML, anti-money laundering, and CFT, countering the finance of terrorism. DataChain has developed its own proprietary system for data intake for Know Your Customer and mobile environment, and electronic submission forms. We have some technologies that we use for assistance as well. Some simple electronic ID validation wherever possible. We do have some advanced facial recognition and other aspects that we use, although it is not our focus as a company, and it sounds like Timothy's company may be more focused on electronic ID validation using blockchain or something like it. I'll be excited to hear. But speaking for our product, those are just some of the technologies that we use because we take KYC so very seriously. If we're going to survive as an industry, and hopefully a self-regulated industry is certainly the goal, then we've all got to maintain very high standards and best practice, and adhere to best practices where it concerns KYC, AML, and CFT. And we can talk a little bit more about the Global Blockchain Consortium and some of the organizations that are involved in that. If anyone is interested, you can contact me afterwards. This slide is just providing some more detail about what I just mentioned around KYC, AML, and CFT. Some of the standards that we follow in the faster payments, real-time payments, and enterprise implementations of blockchain. And then I wanted to be sure to provide some additional resources, and particularly within the fintech arena for PMs. There are a number of different fintech certification courses out there. One of my favorites is given by Dave Schreier, who's the managing director of MIT Connection Science and the lead instructor for the MIT FinTech course on future commerce payment and settlement systems. There's both part-time and online courses, very economical. Dave is a real thought leader in the space, a genius, and a very nice guy. There is also a Silicon Valley executive immersion program called Navigating FinTech Disruption, put on by the Silicon Valley Innovation Center. If anyone is interested in that program, and I'm aware and plugged into several others, mostly located in Silicon Valley in these cases, several others like the Silicon Valley Executive Immersion Program for FinTech extended education types of programs and certifications. So if anyone is interested in any of those references, resources, any of the use cases that we mentioned, any of our products or services, or just want to talk blockchain, I would love to hear from you. Thanks, PM World, for the opportunity to speak. That's the end of my presentation, and I look forward to hearing Timothy Dolros.
Okay, Timothy. Let's see. Tim Christensen, can you make Timothy the presenter?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Let me just...
Over in GoToMeeting.
Yeah, yeah. Center.
Maybe I'll do it. Might be faster.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, looks like I'm good. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can maximize my screen. All right, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Timothy Ruff, and I'm going to probably not tell much about myself or my story. I think you'll learn a little bit as we go. I like to present a lot of slides and very little on each slide, so we actually kind of go quickly. So I hope that's okay. But we started this company a few years ago, and we're really starting to hit our stride now. Some really exciting things happening, and I know I'm being a little bit vague, but I want to be sensitive to your time. I know we're getting close to the hour here, so I'm just going to jump right in, and I will go pretty quick. And there's going to be questions because I think this is a little bit of a mind bender for some people. So I'm going to start with silos. These silos represent siloed identity. And siloed identity is the way the world works today for identity everywhere. A good example is like your bank. When you interact with your bank, whether it's you or any other people around the circle here trying to interact, the only way you can interact with them online or you call in is to present to them a piece of identity information that they gave to you when you set up your account. You have to do that. No matter what it is, whether it's online, walking in, calling in, you have to give back to them something that they gave to you. Same thing happens when you interact with your government. You cannot use your bank ID at your government. There's some countries trying to do that. I've been trying to do that for some time. It just doesn't seem to get very far. And then you got to go do that everywhere else you interact, and including every application. And it goes on and on and on and on. And the average person has 45 different identities. I know people who have over 800 identities. And this is the problem fundamentally with fraud, is that there's so much of our valuable information spread everywhere, and everywhere we interact with has to protect it, has to become an expert in identity and security and protect our information. Online trust is broken and the fraudsters are winning, and the reason I say that is because fraud-related costs are absolutely out of control, and they're getting higher. It's about 5% of the global economy. It leaves a siloed identity leaves an absolute wake of destruction. And it does it for not only people, but also for organizations and now things, which is really scary. For people, there's all kinds of problems. Of course, here in the first world with developed countries, it's just frustrating having a whole bunch of different passwords to remember and a bunch of different identities to manage. Of course, it scatters our private information absolutely everywhere, which leads to identity theft and fraud and all these other things because we have weak passwords. The world is still password-based, and we have too many passwords to remember, so we make them easy to remember, and that makes us easy to impersonate and easy for identity theft to happen. It also makes us hesitate. When we come to a website and they say, create another account, it's like the last thing we want to do is have another identity. And so a lot of times we just back away. And of course our information is harvested and sold without our consent all over the place. For people who have never been on the internet and don't have an identity, it becomes a problem because as soon as they go online, all these Western companies are asking them to register for stuff and they just get dumped into the Google system or the Facebook system, and now they're being spied on. They're being tracked everywhere they go, and it doesn't matter where they are in the country. They fall into the same, or the world, they fall into that same system, which is kind of sad. That by the way, that's why the IEEE reached out to us. This is a picture of Myanmar refugees. Now, these are people that don't have any identity. They don't have any country. And they It's really sad. They've never had one. They have no one to actually issue them identity. UN doesn't issue identity. It doesn't work that way. Then you've got human trafficking. One of the first things they do when they kidnap people, they destroy every form of identity they have. They destroy every piece of paper, every card. They don't call them by their name. They do whatever they can to destroy their identity. Birth registration. I'll tell you a really quick story. In Uruguay, they started to replace the identity system for birth registration with one that involved taking a scan of the baby's footprint. And as soon as they started to do that, the birth abductions, which had become a problem, went to zero, just because they started to take scans of the baby's feet. With the unbanked, there's 2 billion unbanked around the world. And a lot of it is because they don't have an identity. 1.5 billion people don't have any identity at all. It's not just refugees. There's just tons of people who absolutely cannot prove who they are, can't get an account, really can't enter the rest of the economy with the rest of us. And those are just the problems for people. When you talk about things, it's a nightmare. It is truly downright scary. There is a search engine for compromised webcams. Any fetish you want, just do a search engine, or just do a search to find your favorite kind of compromised webcam. Now they thought, some crazy person thought it was a good idea to make pacemakers wireless, and of course now hackable. The solution to siloed identity is to get out of the silo. We call it independent identity. It's for you to have an existence that isn't part of some silo, and this is now possible. And you can now create direct connections, not only with people, but with organizations, with things, and all of these entities can connect directly to each other instead of having to go through these silos. What's needed to do this, however, is a new type of ledger that is engineered for identity. The existing ledgers are not appropriate for identity for a lot of reasons. Number one is privacy, but performance is also a significant issue, and fundamentally trust. And we can talk about these in detail if you have questions about them. It's one of my favorite topics about why the current ledgers are not appropriate for identity. A new ledger has been designed that is a completely different type of ledger than any other kind. It is called Sovereign. It is a global public utility for identity. And the interesting thing about Sovereign, no one owns it. It is truly a global public utility. Instead of just being public or private, which is what a lot of the blockchain world thinks is all that's possible, you can actually have a hybrid that's public in its access, but private in who's allowed to be a node. And what's interesting about who gets to decide who can be a node in the network is a global foundation with trustees from different industries all over the world. And what's fascinating about that foundation, they don't own the network. So if the independently owned and operated nodes decide the foundation isn't doing a good job, or too many banks or too many airlines or whatever, the foundation's job is to make sure that it's nicely diffused all over the world. And if they're not doing their job, the nodes themselves can get together and just kick out the foundation, form another one. They are all independently owned and operated. Nobody owns the network. It's a fascinating new kind of ledger. And it works a lot like an ATM. With an ATM, anybody can walk up and use it, completely public in its access, but not anyone can just turn on an ATM and say, I've got Timothy's ATM, come on over. I'm real, I'm live. But yet that's exactly how a permissionless blockchain works. And it's appropriate for cryptocurrency and for a lot of other applications, not appropriate for identity. But that gives it a metaphor for how sovereign works. And a self-sovereign identity is an identity that you own and control. And you know how to know if an identity is truly self-sovereign? Who can pull the plug? Who can change the rules? If there are terms of service of any kind, it's not self-sovereign. And with a self-sovereign identity from the network called sovereign, it has a lot of characteristics that are really exciting. First of all, it breaks new ground for privacy. It's super secure. It's permanent. If you want it to be, you certainly don't have to make it permanent, but it's as permanent as you want it to be. Other entities, whether they're people, organizations, or things, they link directly to you. And these links that you create enable secure communication, peer-to-peer communication. Any person, organization, or thing connect directly to any other person, organization, or thing with no platform in between. And you can exchange data, you can communicate, you can make a payment, you can do absolutely whatever you want. With your own self-sovereign identity, you now become the source to not only prove who you are, that's just the beginning, but also your rules for how others communicate to you, your preferences now can be ascertained. You can reuse your data over and over and over again. You can change your address in one place. And everyone in the world, whether it's a company or a person or anything that you allow to see your address, can now have your change of address. And you don't have to go do it in all the different silos that you interact with and say, here's my new address, here's my new address, here's my new address. That simple problem of changing your address in one place can finally, with this form of identity, finally be taken care of. Now that independent with identity, and self-sovereign is a form of independent identity, now that it's possible, market conditions make it absolutely inevitable. What kinds of market conditions? The sharing economy. Huge. This is Airbnb, this is Uber, these companies have proven that people want to buy and sell directly from one another. And today, they require a platform in the middle, whether it's Uber, Airbnb, or something like that, to enable the two to find each other. With self-sovereign identity, you don't need a platform in the middle. A platform at the edge, that's all you need. It's a little bit different. Augmented reality, virtual reality, $1 trillion industry, absolutely it depends on identity. The whole identity as a service industry, $1.5 trillion. A key part of it, of course, that's a number we want to go down, not up, by solving the problems that are there. FinTech, nearly $5 trillion, and I've got the sources for all of these numbers. Biometric payments estimated to be $5.6 trillion. BlockChain, which crosses over into a lot of those industries, $8 trillion. And guess what? If blockchain doesn't solve identity, then all these different blockchains that you interact with, you're going to have to have a different one. Same problem all over again. The Internet of Things, according to Cisco, $14.4 trillion, and the biggest one, I would ask for any of you to guess what McKinsey thinks will be a $50 trillion industry. Artificial intelligence and robotics. How would you like your artificially intelligent robotic personal assistant to forget who you are or to be compromised by someone else? Scary. Identity is absolutely fundamental to the security of these new exciting things. The general data protection regulations in Europe, the core principle in these draconian new laws is that any data about you is yours. Period, end of statement. If some company has your data or sells it or does something with it without your consent, the penalties are crazy. 4% of global revenues and throw the CEO in jail. And these types of laws are starting to get to circulate and infect, like a mind virus, regulators all over the world. The UN has come out with Sustainable Development Goal 16.9, which is by 2030, they want to have everyone in the world, legal identity for all, including birth registration. So they are driving the world to try and solve that problem for these 1.5 billion people who don't have it, as they should. And they believe that self-sovereign identity and distributed ledger-based identity is a major breakthrough. The technology is finally here to do identity right with privacy, with independence and true self-sovereignty. And so we invite all of you to join us as we move down this road. I say thank you. So that's it. I do want to, when will we have GDPR? Good question, Yoko. It'll be a little while. But first of all, it'd be nice to actually show that it works in Europe. I do want to talk about some new tools that are exciting to think about for project managers. Now, I'm not a project manager. I do employ a couple of them. We've got a team of 35 people, and 2 of them are project managers, and I had them on the call the other day with David and I think Jackie, and we brainstormed a little bit, because here I'm telling you about identity, which isn't directly related, but what could you do if you had a way to record an event in an immutable manner, and only those that you wanted to share that proof with could see that it happened. And if you could attach it potentially to a smart contract so that as soon as the event happened, it triggered something else to happen, which triggered something else to happen, which triggered something else to happen, whatever you want. And it can be multiple parties, and it can tree off in different directions. These are all the things that become possible. And what's cool is you now have a universal source of truth. So even with a distributed ledger, that's what it becomes. So now you have parties that don't trust each other. Maybe they're competitors working on the same project, but yet can prove that something happened and all agree that something happened and then trigger the next thing to happen from that. So verifiable claims is something, there's a new working group, the W3C, called the Verifiable Claims Working Group, that is trying to make this happen in a very interoperable way. And verifiable claims, as a matter of fact, I'm going to go to a little animation. So I feel like I went pretty quick on the other stuff, so I'm going to divert a little bit. I want to show you how verifiable claims work. This is a project we're working on with all the doctors in the United Kingdom to prove that they're really doctors, because they have a problem with that apparently today. So the Doctors Licensing Authority issues what's called a verifiable claim to a doctor. It says, congratulations, you're new a doctor. You're a new doctor. They would write a proof of that claim to the sovereign ledger, not the actual claim, not even a hash of the claim. There's a correlation risk if you write hashes of information in an identity situation where you want to use a piece of information over and over and over again. Using a hash from a ledger, and this goes back to why you don't want to use a Bitcoin ledger or an Ethereum ledger for identity, because a hash of a piece of information used repeatedly creates a correlation risk so that anyone forever can now figure out what you're doing with that information, even if they can't decrypt it. So we don't write hashes to sovereign. We write proofs to sovereign, which are different. And so now, in a very privacy-respecting way, this doctor can go to a hospital and say, hey, guess what, hospital, I'm a doctor. Here's my a subset of my verifiable claim that she can now present to the hospital. The hospital can now go check against the sovereign ledger and verify that there's a proof there. And the cool thing is, remember, none of her private information is on the sovereign ledger, not even in encrypted form, not even in hash form. None of it is on the ledger, just a proof. The hospital can check the proof and now verify, hey, guess what, now I know you're a doctor. And what's really, and this is called Doctors Link, and this is the thing we're working on for all the doctors in the United Kingdom. What's really exciting about this? The hospital doesn't have to have any connection to the Doctors Licensing Authority. All the hospital has to do is check a public ledger and get information that isn't private. The only thing that's out there is public keys and identifiers. And so if you take this and you apply it to anything, whether it's proving you're a doctor, whether it's proving you're a pilot, or proving that you finished a task on time, it could be my iPhone attesting that I am in a certain location and issuing something. So if someone wants to know if I'm in a certain location, as soon as I reach that location, that proof is written. As soon as the proof is written, it triggers a smart contract that something happens without me having to lift a finger and respecting everybody's privacy. So the tools here are very, very exciting, and I'm going to share you just with a couple of ideas that we came up with our project managers. Chain of custody, proving that something, you know the chain of custody, but being able to have a source of truth of provenance of an item or anything, whether it's tangible or not. Workflows and dependencies, as I just described. It is irrefutable proof that something has occurred, yet revocable. Those sound like oxymorons. But we need in Sovereign a way for a driver's license or the doctor's authority to issue a doctor's license. And the doctor can go prove their license, but guess what? Maybe they had a typo on the license and they give it to the wrong person, or maybe they revoke the license for some reason. They have to be able to do that. Everything's revocable. Every single piece of information on your driver's license needs to be revocable. Why? Because maybe someone made a mistake. They have to be able to change it, even after they've written it to a ledger. So we have found a way to make it revocable. Now, you can't take back the fact that it was issued in the first place, but you can make it so that anyone checking on it can see that it has been revoked. Now, that makes it auditable. and as I mentioned, irrefutable. And of course, the Internet of Things. And there's some companies like BlockChain and Chronicled. But what we're doing that we're super excited about is we've tied these capabilities, this verifiable claims capability, to an identity ledger that respects privacy. And it's available to the whole world as a global public utility. So with that, I'm done. I've gone past my appendix and talked a little bit about some use cases and verifiable claims and open it up to any questions at all.
That's great. Thanks, Timothy and Tim. If you can stand by for a bit, I think we are going to have a couple of questions. Jackie, can you make me the presenter again?
Well, I actually have documented the questions on a notepad. Do you want to take a quick look and see if they match your list?
I've been capturing from the chat. I think I've got them.
This is what I have. Does it match what you've got?
Yeah, well, this is a good actually way to do it then. So maybe we take turns on this. Let me answer two of the, or one or so of the easy ones. Down at the bottom there, the one about the General Data Protection Regulation.
Right.
I've actually been doing some research on that one. It applies to any company doing business in Europe.
Right.
So when you say, when will the U.S. have it, it really applies starting May 25th, 2018, next year, less than a year away. Companies have to meet the requirements if they are working with customers, individuals in the European Union.
So let me add a clarification there. If you have a single customer, a single record in your database that shows up from anyone, anywhere, from a European Union citizen, whether or not you do business in Europe, you are subject to it.
Good point. Thanks for clarifying.
Yep.
So let me ask Tim, if you could answer this next one on the 10-minute operation on Bitcoin. Or actually, Timothy, you've done a lot of financial. So what's a quick and dirty way to explain how many transactions get put in a block?
That I'm going to turn that one over to the expert. I'm not the expert on the Bitcoin ledger. So Tim, take it away.
Sure. I mean, if I understand here correctly, the question. So the question is just that since there's this 10-minute lag, and sometimes it's more, can be more than that. Has been more than that lately. Is there one financial transaction in this operation? So there's multiple transactions in this operation. We'd really kind of need to go back to Dave Snyder's examples in the beginning, because he provided sort of the educational piece for this. There are blocks of data that are tied together with crypto. When a problem is sent for resolution to the Bitcoin miners, yeah, that's typically just one transaction, unless it's in some sort of smart contract format, and I don't think we're taking that into account here. So yeah, typically we're sending one transaction, like a remittance, a send, for instance, of $100 or $10,000 from one country to another via a blockchain-based ledger and a mobile app. That's going to be one transaction at a time. And for financial-related transactions and real-time payment systems, there's most of the usage is actually in a private chain format, where we have much faster processing time, private Bitcoin miners that are often used for private chain solutions. So for most things financial and for our systems, we're not using the public blockchain precisely because of those lags. Maybe if I understand, yeah, go ahead.
Maybe just to clarify, a block can have multiple transactions in it, but each line, each row, a single transaction, it is Joe sends 100 Bitcoin to Bill, and you can have also Susie sends 20 Bitcoin to Mary, but you've got to wait for that group of transactions, that block containing a group of transactions, to be run through the proof of work before you can be confident that it is properly recorded and there no double spend can occur. That's
right. Exactly. And you can batch it different ways, as you're saying, Dave. But yeah, again, as you pointed out, until you actually get the verifying hash back from then you don't have proof that there was consensus resolution of the problem.
And the speed in the private ones comes from the fact that you're not doing this very heavy-duty calculating to do proof because you already trust the people to whom you've granted access. And so,
well, or we're using private Bitcoin miners that have a different SLA.
Right.
There's several different approaches. So and yeah, different solutions for different problems. But yeah, there's also speed just in the performance of a lot of the private data chain, private database solutions for the private chain technologies and platforms, so that we work with. So database scalability for large data volumes and also frequency is important in the private chain world. But anyhow, I hope we answered that question.
I think that's good for now. So let's go to the next one. Let's see who would want to take this one. Users, depending on the performance, since the record will be locked to make sure that only one record at a time, highly dependent on the hardware performance to avoid any hang-ups and data latency. Let's see if I can parse this. Users are depending on the performance since the record will be locked. Well, hardware performance is certainly an issue in scalability. That's why one of the things I was reading today is that currently the Bitcoin network of all these thousands of nodes around the world right now, all those computers running the Bitcoin algorithms are consuming the same amount of electricity as the entire country of Ireland. So it gives you some idea of the amount of computing power that's involved. That is considered to be, in some applications of blockchain, a scalability concern, but for the moment, Bitcoin's working just fine. Slowing down a little bit, but I mean, who needs to know that their Bitcoin transaction has been cleared in less than 10 minutes or even 15 minutes? If you're sending some money or remittance overseas and you want to use Bitcoin, this is still faster than working with some of the other solutions for doing remittances. All right, security consideration from non-blockchain systems. Let's see what we're trying to ask there.
So Yoko, do you want to clarify your question?
Sure. I tried to get it. What's the differences in the securities compared to blockchain system versus non-blockchain system? Is it something different, or I don't know?
Tim Christensen, you want to talk a little bit again about how we're securing things with cryptography?
Sure, or you can take it. Yeah, I mean, our approach to this is sort of multifaceted. So just to be clear, I mean, we do offer blockchain as a service, and we have a a highly secure version of that. I mean, our standard version is highly secure, but I should say there's a premier level of security that's available as well, and in some cases we're securing all the way down to mobile endpoints, so mobile users on a telecom network. So, but those are utilizing overall security architecture and security strategies that are, industry best practices and, working with some of the best in the business. So I would say that, that actually that there are, that general security best practices for, computer security, data security, and importantly, network security, all apply in the blockchain world. Within the blockchain, there is cryptography that is built in to the blockchain infrastructure to both, create firewalls between users and protect, and also protect data from, from viewing by parties who don't have access in a permissioned world. In a permissionless world, everyone's viewing, able to view the transactions that have been posted to a blockchain. And that's in a permissionless public world like Bitcoin or Ethereum. Dave, I don't know if you wanted to extend on that at all.
Well, I wanted to ask Timothy Ruff if he could maybe talk a little bit about how an individual would secure their identity. I know in Bitcoin, you've got your private key, and if you lose that private key, you don't have access to your Bitcoin anymore. In the sovereign model, how do individuals control access to their identity? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I accidentally yanked the cord out. Put it back in before.
You're a little echoey right now.
A little what?
A little bit of an echo, like you're far away from the speaker.
Oh, I don't know how to solve that. So hopefully it goes away. Is it too bad, or should it?
It's getting better. Getting good.
Okay, because there should be echo cancellation here that starts to kick in. That's a great question. You asked a couple different questions, maybe without realizing it. That's how you secure your identity is one thing, and how you recover keys is another. I'll mention recover keys first because that's an interesting one. There, in the siloed world, you can do forgot password, and there's some entity that has access, has ultimate control and sovereignty over that identity, and so you can do forgot password, and they just reset it and go through whatever hoops you need to get access again. In the self-sovereign world, there's no one to do that with, and if you lose your key, you're gone. I mean, you're done. Just like when you lose, you could have millions, and there's story after story. If people losing their keys with Bitcoin, they lose their keys, and they've lost all the money. It's just gone. Nothing you can do. Well, that's absolutely unacceptable with identity. Now, you might think it's unacceptable with money, but money can be restored, and it's like losing your wallet in the Bitcoin world. And they haven't done a lot for the user experience to make it so that people can recover lost keys. It's just the reality that you live with. In the identity world, that is unacceptable. You cannot just simply lose a key and lose your identity. So there are different ways that we make it so that that you can recover your identity and recover control of it. And number one, we don't have it tied to one key that you use for everything. That's number one thing. But another thing is that you can start to tie it to biometrics. And biometrics enable you, I mean, the test that we want to be able to follow is that you can have a refugee that climbs up on the shore of a UN camp with nothing but the shirt on their back, be able to walk in and recover their identity. And a combination of biometrics can enable that. Another way to recover your identity is attestations of other people that you trust. And you can give them, it's called Shamir secret sharing or key sharding. And it's pretty cool. I mean, imagine if you could do forgot password. We don't use passwords, but just imagine this for a second, that your forgot password came in from your family, or from your banker. And your banker and 3 family members could recover your key, but none of them had, when I say a key, none of them had access to your stuff, but any 3 of 7 people, for example, it could be 11 of 19, it could be whatever you want, it's called M of N, could come together and say, yep, this really is Timothy, and recover your control, or restore your control of your stuff. So there's some neat things that can be done that we're exploring with. It's all bleeding edge, never been done before in a production environment. So we're inventing as we go. Yeah, but it's very, very exciting. And we begin with the premise that you must be able to recover your identity from lost keys, and you must be able to recover your identity from compromise, bad guys getting control of stuff. And so everything we do has that in mind. And then, anyway, sorry, that was a long answer. There was another question about...
Really good one,
Yeah,
because it reminds me of the way one of the companies I worked at, when we had whole disk encryption on our laptops, and they said, if you forget your login, you're not out of luck, but you probably want to be careful not to do that, because you're going to have to talk to 3 different people in the company to get them to all get together to recover your laptop. And those people are very busy and they don't want to be bothered, so it's very embarrassing if it happens. And that's the kind of thing that it is doable. It actually, that kind of concept is a really neat one.
Yeah, when you say it's doable, it's really easy to do that in a siloed environment, because you have some software that's written by some company providing the identity system, and they just simply change the controls so that you can't just do forgot password unless you get these 3 other managers to sign off on it. That's not what we're talking about, because that would be trivially easy if in an environment that's siloed. But in a self-sovereign environment, the cryptography involved has never been done before.
Oh, so this is cutting edge, or as it's sometimes called, bleeding edge stuff. So we appreciate you're providing us a window into that world.
Yep.
Well, how are we doing on time, Jackie? Should we be kind of winding down here? I think you may be muted, Jackie.
Yeah, we have lost people who had 8 o'clock commitments. And we lost Dave Hood because he'd already heard Timothy Ruff's presentation at the IEEE event. I think, Yoko, do we need to answer this one about special skills? Or can you make it quick, describe it quickly? I think she's still on.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'd like to know, because, Tim was saying about the prepaid check, basically, but I don't exactly know what kind of skill set that they were looking for.
So I think, for project managers and blockchain projects, it's very helpful to have, background in security, cryptography, database, having managed those types of projects, and application, just general application development of back-end, functional apps is going to be helpful. There's a lot of stuff that's getting written these days in Microsoft Azure environments and a lot of Ethereum apps. There's bound to be a lot of growth in just what are called dApps, or distributed apps on Ethereum, on the Ethereum platform, as that continues to grow and gain momentum. As the leading now #1 public blockchain surpassed Bitcoin a little while ago, I believe. So I think, and having any financial background is likely to be valuable, although that would depend on the particular blockchain project. There's that's one of the leading industries for proof of concepts and actual rubber meets the road production implementations. My development team is responsible for several, for instance, live production instances and implementations utilizing blockchain at the core as a solution. So I think those are the areas that help the most.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, I can answer the payment card industry question real quickly. Nothing specific to blockchain, but if there were to be some credit card processing solution that incorporated blockchain, of course, you'd still have to follow the 12 basic categories and the 200 plus requirements to make sure that card numbers and personally identifying information is protected. So just simply, if card processing is involved, yes, it's PCI.
Yeah, and Dave, I actually have an update on that. This is Tim Christensen. There is one company, and only one that I am aware of in the public realm, that is currently working directly with Visa. Their company symbol is BTL, and they are expected to have a beta out hopefully this fall or winter for something called Interbit, that is supposed to work directly with the interbank market for clearing. So if that happens, that's going to, open up a lot in the blockchain POS world that is not closed right now, but just what's the right word? Discontinuity. There's a lot of discontinuity. There's a lot.
Talking about something
it's not streamlined.
You talking about something that's going to replace ISO 8583?
I'm not familiar with 8583. You'll have to remind me. I work with 20022, the faster payments ISO standards. What's 8583?
It's the fundamental one for credit cards that's been around for an age.
The national ID card, general card one. Yeah. No, I understand you there. No, I don't think it's looking to replace anything there. I think it would still work within that format as I understand it, but best to do one's own research, not my company. I've just read a bit about them, so.
Yeah. Okay, and then on
I can say that nobody else seems to be doing that now. So
yeah,
it's up and coming.
On that last question, I think this really was written in the chat window right before Timothy Ruff started talking about the doctor example. So I think this has been answered pretty much. Timothy, do you think that's true?
Sorry, it's muted. Yes, I think it's true.
And this is really important for project managers. Go off to Saudi Arabia and you want to prove that you really are this or that. It would be good to be able to do that.
Especially in Saudi Arabia, I hear that's a big problem.
Well, it's one of the reasons why some of the certifications are so important, is because nobody knows when you have a degree from XYZ University when there are thousands of universities. But this would follow you around, and that's great. Okay, David, I think we can, shall I make you, I guess I should make Nalini presenter. No, he can't present, so I'll make you presenter and Nalini can wrap up.
Righto.
Sure. So in closing, we would like to provide a link to the archive of this conversation today in the email format. So please make sure to type in your email if you're not a member of Meetup already. And also we will mail you a very short and easy survey. If you could please take a few minutes to answer that, that would be great. And then we'll give us direction as to how to go forward with the next program and how to make it better for everybody. And also, last but not least, we have further programs coming up. Like I mentioned, we have a face-to-face meeting every month and one webinar every month on the second Thursday. So on June 14th, 7 p.m., we have a webinar on self-study courses that you provide, and you'll be interesting for someone who wants to become a program manager or improve their skill set. On June 20th, we have another event regarding portfolio management, BlockChain, and Kanban. So if you're interested in some of those techniques, please join us on June 20th. June 21st, we have a face-to-face meeting. The topic is becoming fireproof, thought leadership, and Johnny Appleseed model. So if you're interested in those kinds of things, please join us on June 21st. And then the next one that is planned, and the last one that is planned for the time being, is on June 26th, 7 p.m. in Santa Cruz. That's a casual networking meetup. So if you're in Santa Cruz area or if you want to be there, it's very beautiful over there. Please join us on June 26th. All of these are advertised on the Meetup website, so feel free to go and check up. You don't have to write down or remember any of these things. But these are the 4 items that we have planned, and we will continue to plan more for coming months. So please take a look and then keep in touch.
All right. Well, thank you so much to Tim Christensen and Timothy Ruff for preparing these presentations and sharing the information with us. To repeat, I understand we're going to be able to put PDFs on the Meetup site. Timothy Ruff, if you want to make it a shorter version because it doesn't have the voiceover and maybe a little bit difficult to understand, if you have some ideas on that, we can talk about that offline.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Jackie?
Thank you very much.
You bet. Jackie, any closing thoughts?